Welcome to GODSpeed, where truth meets life in under 10 minutes. I'm AK, and this is Hope for your journey. Can we be honest with one another for a second? Have you ever felt discouraged by how little you have? Too little financially or emotionally, too few relationships? I feel that way all the time. You're not alone. Sometimes I look at what I can bring to the table and think, this isn't enough. I'm not enough. I feel stuck and defeated before I even start. But what if things that seemed impossible could be completed just because we started small? What if I told you it isn't how much you have, but in your willingness to start with what you do have? Today, I want to share a story where a little is used to solve a lot. For the setting, close your eyes. Imagine it's a school or work day where you miss lunch and dinner has been too long delayed. You know that hangry feeling. That's exactly the scene Jesus faces after he spent hours teaching a large group. Jesus asks his disciples to feed them. Disciple comes from a Latin term that means learner. So it's a person who's choosing to learn from someone wiser. So imagine their surprise at this ask. Because we're not talking about a small gathering. This is 5,000 men, not including women and children that are present. The disciples saw an impossible situation, wondering how could they afford or even get enough bread for all these people. But the plan and the lesson was already in motion. We'll pick up there. This story comes from the book of John, chapter 6, verses 5 through 14. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go amongst so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus had performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who was to come into the world." There are 2 big takeaways here, and I'll give them to you immediately. First, you don't need more resources, but more faith. The second is, if you start with the little you have, it can multiply. Faith is defined as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When Jesus asked the disciples to feed the 5,000, he wasn't asking for a catering recommendation. He was checking their faith level. Would they look to human solutions or think about God-level possibilities? The first disciple immediately thought in terms of his paycheck, saying even half a year's wages wouldn't be enough. How often do we do the same? We look at our lives, our problems, our dreams through the lens of our small resources instead of God's unlimited possibilities and creativity. The other disciple at least went and found something, a kid's lunch. a few pieces of bread and some fish. But even he was discouraged, saying, "How far will this go among so many?" It seemed insignificant, almost not worth mentioning. And it's shared for our knowledge at the beginning. Jesus already had a plan. And in his wisdom, the teacher wanted to let them play a part in seeing the miracle. He wasn't improvising and wasn't panicking, wasn't stressed or pressed about the logistics or portion sizes. Here's something I really want you to notice about this story. Jesus didn't miraculously produce food that wasn't present. He could have. There are stories of God doing cool things like that. But instead, he used what was available. A little boy's lunch, freely offered up. This shows something profound about how God works with small beginnings. He wants us to play a part. He doesn't skip over what we have. He takes what we offer, no matter how small, and multiplies it beyond what we could imagine. If you're wondering what character you are in this story, I think we all start as the disciples, but we're called to be like the little boy. So the Bible doesn't tell us this specifically, but I tend to imagine him handing over the lunch, watching Jesus bless the food, and his eyes get big as the bread and fish turn into more and more and more pieces. See, that boy could have kept his lunch to himself, not mentioning it because it was so small. He could have dismissed himself as irrelevant to solving such a big problem. But instead, his offering became the beginning of a miracle. And don't miss that everyone ate their fill, meaning had their plate in seconds if they wanted it. They were instructed to gather the pieces that are left over. After the all-you-can-eat buffet, they collected 12 baskets full, way more than what they started with. So I have to ask you, what's your 5 loaves and 2 fish? Maybe it's a small amount of savings you've been afraid to use. Perhaps it's the little bit of time you can spare to help someone or connect with someone. Or it could be an opportunity that seemed too small to matter. Whatever it is, shift your heart to gratitude. When you bring your little bit with open hands, it can be multiplied beyond what you ever thought was possible. God, give me the courage to start with what I have instead of waiting for more. Thank you that my limited imagination doesn't limit your goodness. Help me to remember it only takes a little. Amen.
I will always love you how I do. Let go of a prayer for you, just a sweet word